Good morning and welcome to today's mission status briefing. With us this morning are Gary Horlocker, the STS-134 lead flight director, just coming off his Orbit 1 shift, and Heather Hinkle, the principal investigator of STORM. And Gary, would you begin, please?
Thank you. Well, it's really great to be back here, folks. As you know, the mission continues to go very, very well. Endeavour is performing nearly flawlessly, and the crew are doing incredibly well as well. So the crew's about 2 hours away from hatch closure as we sit here talking today. The goal of today, obviously, was to finish up all the internal work between the two vehicles. And I think Derek talked to you quite a bit yesterday about the maintenance on the station CEDRA, the carbon dioxide removal system. So the crew spent a good chunk of the day yesterday working on that. They're taking out one of the beds that we're going to bring home on the shuttle and then replace it with a new one and get it back installed and up and running. So things took a little bit longer than planned yesterday, so we finished that task up today, and everything is good there. We're also finishing up all the cargo transfer between both vehicles. Obviously, all the cargo we hauled up to give to station, we need to get on their side of the hatch, and then all the items that they need us to bring home need to get back on the shuttle before they close the hatches here shortly. We also completed the last of the oxygen transfer from the shuttle to the station today, and we also managed to reboost the stack, doing a shuttle reboost using shuttle propellant. We got them about 1.8 foot per second, which is just over another mile an hour, and that increased their altitude by just under about 0.6 nautical miles, so leave them a little bit higher than when we found them a week and a half ago. And then the crew's also wrapped up some of the EVA activities in the station airlock, getting it cleaned up and partially prepared for the spacewalk on the following mission, STS-135 here in a month or so. The remainder of the day, of course, heading into hatch closure, the crew's going to go ahead and bring the 2 spacesuits from the airlock on the station back to the shuttle. Those are the 2 that we used during several of the spacewalks. Drew wore one of them, and Mike Fink wore the other, so we'll get those back to the orbiter in case we need them between hatch closure and landing. And we'll also be packing double cold bags. We do this pretty much every station flight right before hatch closure. We get numerous science samples, get them in these cold bags, and get them across to the shuttle, and we bring them home for analysis here on the ground. So once we get the hatches closed, the crew's going to go ahead and shift gears a little bit, focusing on the undock tomorrow to get the rendezvous tools checkout complete, as well as get the centerline camera installed, and that'll put them in good shape for the undock and fly around and storm activities for tomorrow. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and walk you through a very short video about the undock and fly around and storm trajectory, if we can get that rolling. So the pilot, Greg Johnson, will be flying the orbiter back to about 400 feet and then initiate the fly around. We'll do the standard full lap fly around, and then we'll do the SEP-1 burn, and that'll set us up on our way to the storm trajectory. We're going to be flying above and behind the space station. We'll get about just inside 30,000 feet behind the space station. And the storm sensors will be taking data all the way out to about 20,000 feet where they'll drop lock. And then they'll be setting up for the reacquisition here in just a minute. So we'll do another burn that'll bring us down below space station, and about 4,000 feet below, we'll do one more burn that'll put us on the storm required trajectory. And once we get that burn complete, we'll be coming into acquisition range of the storm sensors. They'll start taking data all the way in. We'll do a burn that'll bring us up towards station. We'll stall out around 1,000 feet below it, and then slowly drift down and away and do a final SEP burn and keep tracking the station all the way out till the sensors drop lock once again. So that's what we've got in store for tomorrow. I think at this point I'll hand it over to Heather to give you a lot more details on the storm activity.
Thanks, Gary. So the STORM team, we're real excited to get to our primary mission activities. We are a sensor test that was created under the Orion project, which Orion has now become a part of NASA's MPCV program. So what the sensors are, if the camera could zoom over here for a moment, we're flying a laser sensor and also a high definition camera. So the laser sensor shoots a laser at 30 times per second, a flash LiDAR, and it gets a receipt off of any bright surfaces and reflectors that are up on the space station. That allows us to do range and bearing calculations to each of those reflectors or to station surfaces if you don't have any cooperative reflectors on board. The camera can be used, we're assessing it as used for a possible backup as a star tracker, for centroiding off the station from mid-range distances as a possible backup star tracker looking at stars, and then for close-in piloting cues for the Orion pilots and astronauts. So those are the sensors that are out in the payload bay. And what they do is that once they get on the docking axis, the previous mission, these 5 reflective elements were put on board that reflect very brightly in the VNS wavelength, but are essentially blind to the shuttle laser sensor so that there's no interference. And with visibility to these reflective elements, and I'll show some data here in a few minutes, the storm sensors will allow you to be able to calculate 6 degrees of freedom, alignment, and ranging and velocity to your vehicle, which can be used for cruise situational awareness, or you could close the loop around your flight control system and do automatic docking. So the storm sensors were operated during the rendezvous. As Gary mentioned, from about 20,000 feet, the laser locked on to the space station, and we were hoping for that, and we got a little bit better than what we were hoping for out of the sensors. That was really exciting. So we're really looking forward to the re-rendezvous trajectory when we're on an Orion type approach like Gary showed, to prove again that we can exceed our expectations for that sensor. So if you could cue up slide 1. This is sort of a picture of the docking camera on the left, and then the range and intensity from the VNS image on the right. So what you can see is those 3 circles depict where 3 reflective surfaces are. The whole space station is peppered with reflectors. Different vehicles have put them up there. The Europeans use reflectors. The shuttle TCS does, as well as a Japanese vehicle when they approach. So you can see that it was able to pick up those reflectors. And then if you provide centroiding to those 3, you now have very accurate information about where you are compared to the vehicle. Go to the next one, please. This goes a little bit further in, 600 and something feet. You can see now there's a little bit more spread in the reflectors. Next slide. This is getting even closer, and you can see it's very locked on to those 3. You can pick them out easily. As we get a little closer, next. 164 feet, you can see the camera is picking up a lot more detail. And now in your range and intensity, you'll be starting to see a lot more detail. Next. Getting a little bit closer. I think the last one, if you could go to that, is a pretty neat one where you can really see how the VNS paints you a 3-dimensional picture of what you're coming in by the intensity and the range maps you can see there on the right. So the 5 white, I guess the white circles that you see in the top right slide, those are these 5 reflective elements I just showed you on the docking target. And the real bright, kind of bigger one that's a little bit above those, that's the shuttle's TCS reflector. So you can see that real brightly as well. And then the lower one in the range, you can see how powerful the information can be from this sensor and how you could use this for broader applications other than just rendezvous and docking. You could use this for imaging, for hazard avoidance, for performing landing, for use for vehicle rendezvous and docking, of course, as well as things like deforestation. There's just a very broad application of this technology. So that was my last data slide. So we're really excited for the re-rendezvous, where the sensors are ready to go, and expect real good VNS data for the re-rendezvous.
That it, Heather?
Yeah.
Great. We'll start with questions here in Houston. Please remember to identify yourself by name and organization, and please step to the mic to ask your questions. Yes?
Philip Sloss with NASASpaceflight.com. For Gary, on the O2 transfer, was that airlock tanks and station atmosphere, or one or the other?
Yeah, what we wrapped up today was actually the internal atmosphere transfer. We took care of topped off the station tanks yesterday, and I got the numbers here if you want them. We transferred about 17 pounds into the station tanks, and they're all topped off. And so for the internal atmospheric transfer, we provided about 278 pounds of oxygen from the shuttle tanks to the station. So that's what we got accomplished here in the last week and a half.
Thanks. And I'm not sure if this is for you or for Heather. In the undocking timeline and the re-rendezvous timeline that the handout we got here, it talks about the station going to the DTO attitude after undock. Is that just a minor difference between the undocking attitude, the normal undocking attitude? Thanks.
Yeah, it's actually just a couple degrees pitched down, and that allows the storm sensors to acquire the key reflective targets on the Russian side of the vehicle as we're coming from behind and below, so they can get their initial acquisition accomplished. And I don't know if you had any more details on that,
Yeah,
Heather,
we weren't really needing that kind of a special attitude hold until the flight slipped into the time frame where the ATV was docked to the aft end, and it blocked off most of the reflectors that were back there. And of course, not knowing we hadn't proved this sensor in orbit yet, we wanted to give ourselves the best chance of having those reflectors pointing toward the shuttle as it came in, so we'd have the best look angles to those reflectors. And so station agreed to hold that attitude for us to increase our chances of getting that. And we have no doubts anymore based on what we saw for rendezvous.
Okay, do we have other questions? Robert?
Robert Perlman with collectspace.com. I think for Gary, first, a couple of questions about things that were in the execute package today. There was an area of interest, I guess, for the fly around on the ATV. Can you just describe what it is and why they need imagery of it?
Yeah, I can touch on that. I don't know too many of the details, but I know when they initially launched and separated from their launch vehicle, they saw something a little bit off nominal, and so they want to get some images of kind of the aft end of the vehicle where it was attached to the launch vehicle, and see if they can get some kind of indication of that, help them explain what they saw on launch day. So we're going to take about 10 minutes out of the 45-minute fly around and go ahead and focus in on that area and get a bunch of imagery for them, and then we'll go ahead and configure back and get the rest of our normal fly around photos.
Thanks. And for Heather, there's also a note about the docking camera not being available to storm ops. Can you share what impact that has, if any, on the DTO?
Sure, thanks. We had an issue with the data recorder that records the camera data. During some docked activities, we pulled data off our recorders, and we were seeing some strange behaviors during that time. So we added a checkout activity on flight day 13, and when we were trying to perform that activity, the data recorder would not complete its initialization. So at this point, it looks likely that we won't be able to record any docking camera data on the undock and re-rendezvous. So that's a big disappointment to the SORN team. We're really fortunate that we got great data on rendezvous. We met about 2/3 of our objectives already. There were some lighting objectives that we didn't get to see, sun entering and exiting the field of view, and a few other of the harsh lighting conditions we were hoping to assess with the camera. We have procedures prepared for Drew that if the recorder comes up nominally tomorrow, he'll follow a different set of procedures than if it does not initialize correctly tomorrow. Then he'll have to go and run a couple of extra steps to power some things down for us.
And in the larger sense of the full test, will that lack of data mean that you need another qualification run to fully test out this system, or whatever you get will be sufficient?
Whatever we get will be sufficient, and The re-rendezvous was most designed for the VNS, to meet the VNS objectives. So we have our primary objective coming up at that long range on the re-rendezvous trajectory for the VNS. And it was another opportunity to try to expand the range of lighting conditions that we would see on orbit. That's one of those real tricky things to simulate on the ground with cameras. As much as you try to sun simulators, and there's that harshness of the orbital shadowing and lighting conditions. We got to see a lot of those types of things during rendezvous. We saw some good sun glints and some of those other things. We saw a sunset on the station that we got during rendezvous. So we were fortunate that we got as much as we did. And I think we feel we'll have been able to assess enough to feel that camera will be a good camera to use for Orion.
And one last question for Gary. Do you have transfer totals? How much was moved cargo-wise between shuttle and station?
I do not, but we can easily get those for you.
Okay, Denise?
Denise Chow at space.com. A question for Heather. For the storm sensors, other than the 5 reflectors that were put on the docking target from the last mission, is there anything else that would need to be added to the station for it to be used with the MPCV or Orion capsule?
At this point, no. I think the fact that Storm has proven that the sensor can lock on as further than 5 kilometers out allows them to have the good relative navigation information they need to target their burns for prox ops and approaching the station for docking. So that was the biggest thing to prove out. There's no LiDAR sensors today that go anywhere near 5 kilometers. And so to have that proven out and to allow those models to go feed back into the MPCV project and to know that the surfaces are reflective enough as is at those ranges, that was a big thing to go and prove.
And then a question for Gary. I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts on Endeavour and docking for the final time. Thanks.
Sure. So obviously, we've been focusing on this very long, very complex mission for a long time, and I think it's really going to hit home after Endeavour sitting on the runway there, hopefully in Florida in a couple days. She's really been a great ship. Like I said, almost performed flawlessly this flight. Really, the only couple little issues we saw were really nits, and just a real testament to the KSC team that prepares the vehicles that we go off and execute these missions with. So it's going to be sad to see her retire, but I can't think of a better mission for her to have her last flight with. So,
any additional questions here in Houston? Seeing none, we'll move on to reporters on the phone bridge. Mark Carreau.
Yes, thanks. Mark Carreau for Aviation Week. And I have 2 questions. The first one is for Gary Horlocker. I just wondered if the reboost was part of the preparations for the Soyuz 27S mission coming up in June, or some other reason.
Yeah, so, the space station, they've got vehicles coming and going on a regular basis, the progress ships for the Soyuz vehicles, as well as shuttles and, HTVs, et cetera. So, stations got to look at this from a long-term perspective. So they're always looking at, making sure the vehicles in front of them, especially the Soyuz, like you mentioned, are going to have the right conditions for their re-entry and landing. That's key. So between ATV being there, I think they're going to be there about another month, and with the orbiter there, they basically they already had a plan to manage their altitude to meet everybody's requirements, and then they were able to go ahead and accept a little bit of a reboost from us as well, and still make everything work out down the road. So, it's just a constant thing you do at the space station is you continue to work your altitude and all your vehicles coming and going. So really nothing unique here. It's just we were able to provide a little bit of propellant and a little bit of help to them, and so it worked out really well.
Okay, thank you. And I had a question for Heather Hinkle. I've heard that the storm sensors that are being tested could be part of the OSIRIS-REx mission. I think I said that right. That was announced last week, or the asteroid sample return mission. I just wondered if that was so, and if correct, how the sensors might be used?
Well, again, thanks for the question. We actually received some emails from that group during this mission asking how's everything going. We're really looking forward to using a sensor. We've chosen the VNS as our prox-op sensor for this mission, and we'd really like to hear about how things went and share some data with you, or if you could share some data with us. And so we sort of said, everything's going great, and we love to meet with you, but you got to wait till after the mission. We're pretty busy with all the preparing for all this. But as you saw from the very last slide especially, if you would approach something that had no reflective elements on it for you, the VNS can paint you a complete three-dimensional picture of where you're going. So I think we will have a lot of really great data that we can hopefully find a way to do some great sharing with that project, and they can utilize that to help build some algorithms. We're also working with another Goddard group, building another VNS and the same sort of purpose, which would be where you don't have any reflective surfaces that you've put on there in known locations, and you have to use that raw three-dimensional range and intensity image to do your ranging and approach information with.
And if I might follow on that, does that mean you're going to sort of look into the possibility of using these sensors for that mission, or that's to be determined way down the road?
So I'm not sure I understood your question.
Sure.
We at JSC? The storm group?
Yeah, I just wondered if the storm sensors were a possible part of that mission, or they will be used as part of that flight.
Okay, so I understand. So the storm VNS sensor is the particular one that they have chosen to use for their mission. So the storm mission has sort of proven out in space the ability to track surfaces to provide this very highly accurate three-dimensional image of what you're approaching. And I think that they'll find that the data is going to be extremely useful for their mission.
Thank you.
Is that it, Mark?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Stephen Clark.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Can you, one of you, refresh us on which crew members play what roles on the Storm Re-Rendezvous? Do Box and Mark Kelly switch positions in terms of who's overseeing the piloting duties during that Re-Rendezvous approach?
Yeah, so Box will be on the controls once we open the hooks and start backing Endeavour away from the space station. He'll be controlling it, flying it back out on the V-bar till he gets about 400 feet or so, and then he'll initiate the fly-around activity, and he will be in control of the vehicle for the whole fly-around. Once Step 1 is complete, Box and Mark are in a swap positions, and Mark will be flying the Storm Re-Rendezvous trajectory and doing all those burns. Oh, and I'm sorry, I guess obviously Drew's going to be our key guy on the Storm laptop and all the Storm procedures. He's our go-to guy for Storm, so that's how that's going to play out.
All right, thank you.
Bill Harwood.
Yeah, thanks. Two for Heather. You mentioned that this has possible applications for deep space mission. Is this something that a commercial manned spacecraft provider could license or use?
Yes, absolutely. This has very valid application for any space vehicle trying to perform the function of rendezvous and docking, either with another vehicle or trying to land it on a surface, or to rendezvous into close proximity with something else that's out in space.
Thanks. And then a standard reporter question, is there a cost that goes with this test today, the hardware, and what does it cost to put it together? Yeah,
the putting together the sensor sort of came from three different flavors. The Orion project, there's always a set of non-recurring engineering costs to get your foundry set up to build your very highly technical detector that detects the laser light. So there's that sort of underlying cost that's a one-time thing. Then the work to put the actual unit together, test the unit, and also the camera, that was paid for under Orion as well, under a different contract. And then Lockheed Martin actually purchased the VNS unit and is letting the government borrow it to fly on Storm. And then it will go back to their ground facility in Denver, where they'll recreate the about 200 feet in Storm trajectory from rendezvous and docking on the V-bar, and use that to update models and to practice their GNC algorithms. So it's sort of a conglomeration of costs.
Well, no, I understand that. What number is there out there, however you want to characterize it?
Let's see. It's in the order of tens of millions by the time you add in all the non-recurring engineering. The unit itself was less than $2 million, I believe, and then the cost to do all of the preparation of the unit, the qualification testing for environmentals, certifying it to fly on the shuttle, that was under $10 million.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I believe we have no further questions. On the transfer question, we don't have a number from late today. Earlier in the crew day, it was about 82% complete, and we expect some fresher numbers in a tag up a little bit later today. That will conclude today's briefing. You can follow activities of Endeavour and the International Space Station at www.nasa.gov. Thank you for coming.